The crystal glass hit my silk blouse with a sharp crash, red wine spreading across the cream fabric like blood. "Now you look as cheap as you really are," Madison sneered. My 17-year-old niece standing over me at my own 32nd birthday dinner. The entire restaurant fell silent. My sister Jessica smirked from across the table, while my mother nodded approvingly. "She had it coming," Mom whispered. I dabbed my blouse with a napkin, smiled sweetly, and said, "Thank you for the birthday surprise, honey." The drive home felt like a funeral procession, my ruined designer blouse clinging to my skin as the wine stain set deeper with each passing mile. I kept the radio off, needing the silence to process what had just happened at Romano's, the upscale Italian restaurant where I'd planned to celebrate not just my birthday, but what should have been the happiest announcement of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I replayed the scene. The way Madison had deliberately lifted that glass of Chianti, the calculated smirk on her face as she aimed for my cream silk blouse, the satisfied nod from my mother Carol, as if I deserved public humiliation on my own birthday. And Jessica, my older sister by 3 years, leaning back in her chair with that familiar expression of vindicated superiority. This wasn't just teenage rebellion or a moment of poor judgment. This was the culmination of years of carefully constructed family dynamics that had positioned me as both the provider and the scapegoat. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I found myself doing what I always did when overwhelmed, running numbers in my head. It's what made me good at my job as a financial advisor, this ability to see patterns and calculate outcomes. The pattern was clear now, even if I'd been blind to it for years. When our father died of a heart attack 6 years ago, I was 26 and just starting my career. Jessica was 29, with a 12-year-old daughter and no college degree, having dropped out sophomore year when she got pregnant. Mom was 58, working part-time at a department store and drowning in medical bills from Dad's final months. I stepped up, because that's what family does, right? I took on Jessica's car payments when she couldn't make them. I paid for Madison's private school tuition because the public schools in their neighborhood weren't great. I covered Mom's prescription costs and helped with her mortgage when her hours got cut. I told myself I was investing in our family's future, being the responsible daughter Dad had raised me to be. But somewhere along the way, gratitude had curdled into expectation, and expectation had soured into entitlement. Jessica began making comments about how I was lucky to have my education and career, conveniently forgetting that I'd worked 2 jobs through college while she was partying. Madison learned to treat me like an ATM, texting me demands for designer shoes and concert tickets with the casual expectation of a trust fund baby. The worst part was how they'd weaponized my success against me. Every nice thing I owned became evidence of my selfishness. Every boundary I tried to set became proof that I thought I was better than them. Mom, drowning in her own grief and guilt, had chosen sides long ago, and it wasn't mine. Tonight was supposed to be different. I'd made reservations at Romano's, splurged on the private dining room, even ordered their special birthday dessert presentation. David, my boyfriend of 2 years, was supposed to meet us there after his business dinner ran late. I'd been so excited to share our news with the family. Instead, Madison had started the evening by criticizing my outfit. That blouse probably cost more than Mom spends on groceries in a month, she'd said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Are you trying to show off or something?" I should have known then that the evening was doomed. Jessica had ordered the most expensive items on the menu without glancing at prices, while making passive-aggressive comments about people who throw money around to make themselves feel important. Mom had spent the entire appetizer course listing everything that was wrong with my life choices, from my cold apartment to my workaholic tendencies to my failure to settle down and give her grandchildren. The wine incident happened just as our entrees arrived. Madison had been complaining about her summer job at a boutique, claiming the manager was totally unfair for expecting her to show up on time. When I gently suggested that punctuality was important in any job, she'd snapped. "You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your fancy clothes?" she'd hissed, her voice rising. "You act like you're better than everyone, but you're just pathetic. You buy people's love because you know nobody would choose to be around you otherwise." The words hit harder than the wine that followed. Because in that moment, as the entire restaurant turned to stare at our table, I realized she might be right. Not about being pathetic, but about buying love. I'd been funding their lives for so long that I'd forgotten what genuine affection felt like. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my ruined blouse squelching with each step. The hallway light flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to mirror my fractured thoughts. I fumbled with my keys, exhaustion settling into my bones like lead. But as I opened my door, warm light spilled out from my living room, and my heart lifted despite everything. David was there, sitting on my couch with his tie loosened and his jacket draped over the armchair. His face was serious, concerned, and I realized he must have gotten my text about dinner ending early. "How was it?" he asked, standing as I entered. Then he saw my blouse, and his expression shifted to alarm. "Harper, what happened? Are you hurt?" I was about to launch into the story when I noticed something that made my breath catch. There, on my coffee table, sat a small velvet box. The kind of box that holds promises and futures and everything I'd been hoping for since we'd started talking about marriage 6 months ago. But David's expression wasn't joyful or excited. It was conflicted, almost pained. "I was there," he said quietly, "at Romano's. I got to the restaurant early and decided to wait at the bar until your dinner was finished. I wanted to surprise you afterward with—" He gestured toward the box. But then, I saw what happened. All of it. My heart began to race, but not with the excitement I'd imagined feeling in this moment. Something was very wrong. "David, what are you saying?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of processing difficult decisions. "I'm saying I watched your family treat you like garbage on your birthday. I watched your own niece humiliate you in public, while your mother and sister encouraged it, and I watched you smile and take it like it was normal." The velvet box seemed to pulse on the table between us, a symbol of a future that suddenly felt uncertain. "I love you, Harper," David continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can't marry someone who allows themselves to be treated that way. I won't sign up to watch the woman I love be abused by her own family for the rest of our lives." The words hit me like physical blows. I sank onto my couch, still wearing my wine-stained blouse, staring at the engagement ring I might never receive. "I need time to think," David said softly. "We both do. This isn't just about tonight. This is about the pattern I've been watching for 2 years. You give and give and give, and they take and take and take, and somehow you've convinced yourself that's love." He picked up his jacket, pausing at the door. "I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a few days. When you decide whether you're ready to put yourself first for once, call me." The door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with the engagement ring that represented everything I'd wanted and might have lost because of everything I'd tolerated. I sat in the silence of my apartment until 3 in the morning, still wearing that stained blouse, staring at the unopened ring box on my coffee table. David's words echoed in my mind, like a diagnosis I didn't want to accept but couldn't deny. He was right, and the truth of it burned worse than the wine that had ruined my birthday. Unable to sleep, I found myself at my laptop, opening my financial management software. If I was going to face the truth about my relationships, I might as well face all of it. The numbers that appeared on my screen told a story I'd been avoiding for years. Jessica's credit card, for which I was the primary account holder with her as an authorized user. $23,467 in outstanding debt. Her car payment, which I'd been covering for 3 years, $412 monthly. Madison's car insurance, under my policy for better rates, $198 monthly. Madison's cell phone plan, $85 monthly. The automatic transfer to Mom's checking account, $500 monthly. The calculations made me nauseous. Over the past 3 years, I'd been spending $4,195 every month supporting my family. That was $50,340 per year. In 3 years, I'd given them more than $150,000, not counting birthday gifts, Christmas presents, emergency loans, and dining expenses like tonight's disaster. $150,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a wedding and honeymoon, and the start of a real life with David. That was my retirement fund, my emergency savings, my future I'd been handing over one monthly payment at a time. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what David had recognized, and I'd been too conditioned to see I wasn't buying their love. I was buying their tolerance. They didn't appreciate my sacrifices. They resented them because my generosity reminded them of their own failures. I opened my banking app and began making changes. First, Jessica's credit card. I removed myself as the primary account holder and transferred the account entirely to her name. The website warned me that this would affect her credit score and that she'd be responsible for the full balance, but I clicked confirm anyway. Next, I canceled the automatic transfer to Mom's account. Then I removed Madison from my car insurance policy and phone plan. Each click felt like cutting strings that had been binding me to a puppet show where I was both the performer and the victim. My friend Marcus owned a towing company, and I'd helped him restructure his business loans last year. I called his emergency line, knowing he'd be awake. He often worked nights. "Marcus, it's Harper. I need a favor." "Harper? It's 3:30 in the morning. What's wrong?" "I need you to repossess a car tomorrow morning. 2007 Mazda Miata, silver, license plate." I gave him Madison's information, including where she'd parked in my mother's driveway. "Repossess? Harper, that doesn't sound like you." "The insurance policy was canceled tonight for non-payment, so technically the car can't be legally driven. I need it picked up at exactly 6:45 in the morning." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You sure about this? This sounds like family drama, and I don't like getting in the middle of that." "Marcus, I've been paying for that car's insurance for 3 years while the actual driver treats me like dirt. Tonight she threw wine on me at my birthday dinner and called me pathetic. I'm done enabling bad behavior." "All right, but you owe me the full story later. 6:45 sharp?" 6:45 sharp. After I hung up, I turned my phone to silent mode. By tomorrow evening, Jessica's credit card would be declined wherever she tried to use it. Madison would wake up to find her car missing. Mom would discover her monthly allowance had vanished. The chaos would begin early, and I wanted to sleep through the initial wave of panic and anger. But first, I needed to document everything. I'd learned from my clients that financial decisions should always be backed by solid reasoning. I opened a new document and began typing out every incident of disrespect, manipulation, and emotional abuse I could remember from the past 3 years. Madison telling her friends I was desperate for attention when I bought her homecoming dress. Jessica complaining to neighbors that I was controlling when I asked her to make minimum payments on the credit card. Mom telling her church group that I was selfish with my blessings while I was literally paying her mortgage. The list grew longer than I expected. Incidents I dismissed or rationalized now looked like a clear pattern of exploitation. They'd been taking advantage of my love and guilt, while actively working to undermine my self-worth. As dawn approached, my phone began buzzing with notifications despite being on silent. The screen lit up repeatedly. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. I ignored them all, but I did check who was calling. Jessica, Madison, Mom, over and over, increasingly frantic. But there was one unexpected call that made me pause. David's mother, Ellen, had called at 3:47 in the morning and left a voicemail. Ellen was a retired English professor, elegant and thoughtful, who had always been kind to me but maintained polite distance. Why would she be calling? I played the voicemail, her warm voice filling my quiet apartment. "Harper, dear, this is Ellen. I hope I'm not overstepping by calling, but I was at Romano's tonight with my book club for our monthly dinner. We were seated 2 tables away from your celebration, and I witnessed what happened. I saw that young woman throw wine on you, and I saw how your family reacted. My heart began beating faster. I called David afterward, and he told me what he'd said to you. I need you to know something, dear. I've been watching my son struggle with this relationship not because he doesn't love you, but because he loves you too much to watch you be mistreated. What I saw tonight was unacceptable, and your composure in that situation showed more grace than I would have managed." She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "David is staying at his brother's tonight because he's confused, not because he's given up on you. He thinks you'll choose them over him, but I think he's wrong. I think you're stronger than he realizes, and I hope you prove that. You deserve so much better than what I witnessed tonight." The voicemail ended, leaving me staring at my phone in the growing daylight. Ellen had seen everything, understood everything, and instead of judging me for tolerating abuse, she'd seen my strength. More importantly, she'd confirmed that David's reaction came from love, not rejection. At 6:45 exactly, I heard a truck engine in the distance, followed by the distinctive sound of a car being loaded onto a tow truck. Madison's Miata was gone, right on schedule. My phone lit up immediately with frantic calls from Jessica's number. I smiled, turned the phone face down, and went back to sleep. When I woke up, the real reckoning would begin. I woke up at 11:30 to the sound of my apartment buzzer being pressed repeatedly, accompanied by aggressive knocking on my door. My phone showed 63 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The chaos had begun exactly as I'd anticipated. Through my peephole, I could see Jessica pacing in the hallway, her face red with anger, while Madison slumped against the wall looking devastated. They'd clearly been there for a while, waiting for me to answer. I took my time getting ready, showering and putting on my favorite navy blazer and crisp white pants, an outfit that projected confidence and professionalism. I wanted to look exactly like the successful woman I was, not the victim they'd trained me to be. When I finally opened the door, Jessica rushed past me into my apartment without invitation, Madison trailing behind like a whipped puppy. "What the hell did you do?" Jessica screamed, her voice shrill with panic. "My credit card was declined at the grocery store this morning. The cashier had to call security because I couldn't pay for my groceries." "Do you know how humiliating that was?" "And my car is gone," Madison wailed, collapsing onto my couch dramatically. "Someone stole my car right out of Grandma's driveway. I called the police and everything, but they said it was repossessed for insurance issues. That makes no sense." I walked calmly to my kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, taking a slow sip before responding. "Your car wasn't stolen, Madison. It was legally repossessed because the insurance policy was canceled for non-payment." "Non-payment?" Jessica's voice cracked. "You've been paying the insurance. You can't just stop." "Actually, I can. Just like I can remove myself as the primary holder on credit cards I never used and stop automatic transfers I never agreed to make permanent." Madison stared at me with genuine confusion. But you're supposed to help us. Your family." The innocence in her voice almost broke my heart. She genuinely didn't understand that family relationships should be reciprocal. She'd been raised to see me as a resource, not a person. "Madison, can you tell me the last time you said thank you for anything I've done for you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking to her mother for help. Jessica crossed her arms defensively. "She shouldn't have to thank you for doing your family duty," Jessica snapped. "You have more money than the rest of us. It's not like it hurts you to help." I walked to my dining table where I'd prepared a folder the night before. Inside were printed bank statements, credit card bills, and a detailed spreadsheet showing every dollar I'd spent on them over the past 3 years. $157,423, I said, sliding the folder across the table. "That's how much of my income has gone to supporting both of you over the last 3 years. That's not counting gifts, dinners, or emergency loans." Jessica's face went pale as she flipped through the documents. Madison leaned over her shoulder, her eyes widening as she saw the numbers. "I put myself through college working 60 hours a week while taking 18 credit hours per semester," I continued, my voice steady. "I built my career by sacrificing social relationships and personal time. I did that so I could have the financial stability to help my family when needed. But somewhere along the way, temporary help became permanent expectation." "You're our family," Madison whispered, her voice small. "Families help each other." "You're right, families do help each other. When's the last time either of you helped me with anything? When's the last time you asked about my life, my problems, my dreams? When's the last time you treated me with basic respect, let alone gratitude?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Jessica fidgeted with her purse strap while Madison stared at her hands. "Last night, Madison, you threw wine on me and called me pathetic in front of a room full of strangers. On my birthday. While I was wearing an outfit that cost more than your monthly car payment, which I was making. Jessica, you smiled and encouraged her behavior. Can you explain to me how that demonstrates family love?" "We were just." Jessica started, then stopped. There was no reasonable explanation for their behavior. You were just what? Teaching me humility? Putting me in my place? Punishing me for being successful? Madison began crying, but these weren't the manipulative tears I'd seen before. These looked genuine, confused, and afraid. I didn't think, she sobbed. I didn't realize how much money. I thought you were just rich and didn't care about money. I'm not rich, Madison. I'm comfortable because I work 80 hours a week and live below my means. Every dollar I spent on you was a dollar I didn't save for my own future, my own home, my own family. Your own family? Jessica's voice turned sharp. We are your family. No, you're my relatives. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, making sure they could see what I was doing. I want to be very clear about something. This conversation is being recorded. I've also documented years of financial support with bank records and saved every text message where Madison bragged to her friends about manipulating her stupid rich aunt, or where you complained to neighbors about my supposed character flaws while I was paying your bills. Jessica's face went white. You've been spying on us? I've been documenting a pattern of emotional and financial abuse. Did you really think I wouldn't eventually notice that every gift was criticized, every kindness was taken for granted, and every boundary I tried to set was met with guilt trips and manipulation? Madison looked up from her tears. We weren't abusing you, we were just. You were just using me, I finished gently. And you taught each other that it was okay to do it because I allowed it. The room fell silent except for Madison's quiet crying. Jessica was staring at the financial documents, apparently calculating how much money she was about to lose access to. Finally, Jessica spoke, her voice smaller than before. So what happens now? You just cut us off completely? Abandon your family because we're not perfect? What happens now depends on whether you're capable of treating me like a human being instead of an ATM. Whether you can acknowledge that your behavior has been unacceptable and commit to changing it. And whether you understand that respect and gratitude aren't optional parts of family relationships. My phone buzzed with a call from Marcus. I answered it on speaker. Harper, you asked me to call when I finished processing the vehicle. I've got some interesting news about that Miata. What kind of news? Well, we do a standard search of vehicles when we impound them, for insurance and liability purposes. Found some items in the trunk that might interest you. Madison went rigid, her face draining of color. What kind of items? Designer handbags, jewelry, electronics, all still in store packaging or with tags attached. Looks like about $15,000 worth of merchandise. I'm required to report this to the police, since it appears to be stolen goods. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Madison began hyperventilating, and Jessica looked like she might vomit. Madison, I said quietly, is there something you need to tell me? She couldn't speak, just nodded frantically through her tears. The truth was about to get much worse than I'd imagined. Before Madison could explain the stolen merchandise, my apartment door opened and David walked in, looking haggard and carrying his laptop bag. He stopped short when he saw Jessica and Madison, taking in the scene of scattered financial documents, tears, and obvious confrontation. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have knocked. I needed to see you. No, stay, I said, my heart lifting despite everything. We're having a family meeting about honesty. Madison was just about to explain why there are $15,000 worth of stolen goods in her car. David's eyebrows shot up, and he set his laptop on the counter. Stolen goods? Madison was hyperventilating, clutching her chest. I can't breathe. Take deep breaths, I said, my financial advisor training kicking in. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. You're having a panic attack, not dying. Jessica had gone completely silent, staring at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. Madison, I said gently once her breathing stabilized, the police are going to want answers. It's better if those answers come from you voluntarily. I've been taking things, she whispered, from the stores where I shop. I told them I was your niece, that you were this big financial advisor who would cover anything I couldn't pay for. They let me put things on your credit, even without the card sometimes. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, on my credit? I told them you'd authorized me to make purchases and that you'd settle the accounts later. Some stores have your information from when you bought me things before, so they trusted me. David opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. Harper, what's your credit score supposed to be? I told him, and his face grew grim as he pulled up credit monitoring websites. You need to see this. Someone has been opening store credit accounts in your name for months. The laptop screen showed a list of credit inquiries that made my stomach drop. Nordstrom, Saks, Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus. 12 different store credit cards, all opened within the past 8 months, with a combined available credit of over $40,000. Jessica, I said, my voice deadly calm, did you know about this? Jessica couldn't meet my eyes. Madison said you'd given her permission to use your credit for her job. She needed professional clothes for the boutique. Professional clothes? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Madison works part-time at a teen clothing store in the mall. She doesn't need Prada handbags for that job. David was still typing, his cybersecurity background making him far more thorough than I could be alone. Harper, there's more. Someone tried to apply for a home equity line of credit against your condo last week. It was denied because of irregular activity on your credit report, but the application was definitely submitted. The room started spinning. A home equity line of credit? For how much? $120,000. I stared at Jessica, who had turned green. You tried to mortgage my home? Without my knowledge? I needed the money, Jessica exploded, finally breaking her silence. Madison got into some trouble with the store credit cards, and I needed to pay them off before you found out. I was trying to protect you from being embarrassed. Protect me? You committed identity theft and fraud? I was going to pay it back. Once Madison graduated and got a real job, once I figured out how to fix everything. David's expression had shifted into professional mode. Harper, this is serious criminal activity. Identity theft, credit fraud, attempted mortgage fraud. Jessica could face federal charges. Madison began crying again, but Jessica stood up defiantly. You can't prove I did anything. Those applications could have come from anywhere. David turned his laptop screen toward her. Actually, I can trace the IP addresses of where these applications were submitted. 3 came from your home address, 2 from your work computer, and 1 from Harper's mother's house. Mom knew about this? I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I needed help with the paperwork, Jessica said weakly. She didn't know what it was for. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, and I answered on speaker without thinking. Harper, you need to stop this nonsense right now. Mom's voice filled the room. Jessica told me you've cut off her credit cards and had Madison's car stolen. This is not how we handle family problems. Mom, did you help Jessica fill out loan applications using my personal information? Silence. Then, she said you'd asked her to help you with some financial planning. She lied to you, Mom. She's been committing identity theft and credit fraud. Madison has been stealing thousands of dollars worth of merchandise and charging it to credit accounts opened illegally in my name. That's impossible. Jessica wouldn't do that. Mom, Jessica said quietly, I need to tell you something. For the next 20 minutes, the truth came pouring out. Jessica admitted to forging my signature on credit applications. Madison confessed to months of theft and fraud. Mom, listening on speakerphone, became quieter and quieter as the scope of the deception became clear. I don't understand, Mom finally said, her voice small. Why would you do this to Harper? She's only ever tried to help us. Because she makes it so easy, Jessica screamed, her facade finally cracking completely. She just gives and never asks for anything back, and it makes me feel like garbage. Every time she pays for something, every time she solves our problems with her money, it reminds me that I'm a failure. The honesty was brutal and raw. David closed his laptop and leaned against the counter, watching the family dynamic he'd been trying to understand finally expose itself. So you decided to steal from me because my success made you feel bad about yourself? I asked. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Jessica sobbed. It started with just the credit cards, to buy Madison some nice things for school. Then Madison started taking stuff. and I had to figure out how to pay for it before you noticed. Then I needed more money to cover the payments, and everything just spiraled. And instead of coming to me for help, you decided to commit crimes? Because I was ashamed, Jessica yelled. I was ashamed that my little sister had to take care of me and my daughter. I was ashamed that I never finished college, that I never built a career, that I'm 35 years old and can't support myself. Do you know what it's like to have everyone compare you to someone perfect? The word perfect hung in the air like an accusation. Perfect? I laughed bitterly. Jessica, I work 80 hours a week. I haven't had a real vacation in 4 years. I almost lost the man I love because I've been so busy taking care of everyone else that I forgot to take care of myself. I'm not perfect. I'm exhausted. Madison looked up through her tears. We didn't know you felt that way. You always seemed so. Together. Because that's what you needed me to be. If I had broken down, who would have taken care of everyone? David stepped forward. Harper, we need to talk about next steps. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is serious criminal activity that affects your financial future. My phone buzzed with another call from Marcus. When I answered, his voice was grim. Harper, the police want to talk to you about those items we found. Apparently, your niece has been on their radar for months. Multiple stores have reported credit fraud connected to your name, and they've been building a case. The merchandise in the car confirms their suspicions. I looked at Madison, 17 years old and facing potential criminal charges. Then at Jessica, who had systematically destroyed my credit while I was trying to help her. Marcus, can the police wait until tomorrow? I need to consult with a lawyer first. They're willing to wait, but not much longer. This is a big case. We're talking multiple felonies across several jurisdictions. After I hung up, the apartment fell silent, except for the sound of Madison's quiet crying and Jessica's shaky breathing. So, David said finally, what happens now? I looked at my family, broken, ashamed, and finally forced to face the consequences of years of manipulation and lies. For the first time in my adult life, I held all the power. The question was what I would do with it. I walked to my kitchen and made a fresh pot of coffee, needing the time to think clearly. David sat down across from Jessica and Madison, his presence both comforting and sobering. This man had been ready to propose to me last night, and instead he discovered my family was a criminal enterprise built on lies and exploitation. David, I said as the coffee brewed, you work in cybersecurity. In your professional opinion, how serious are the charges my family is facing? He ran his hands through his hair, something he did when calculating risk assessments. Identity theft is a federal crime that can carry up to 15 years in prison. Credit fraud, depending on the amounts involved, can add another 10 to 20 years. The attempted mortgage fraud makes it worse because it involves substantial amounts. Madison's retail theft might be handled at the state level, but with the dollar amounts you're talking about, she's looking at felony charges. Madison began hyperventilating again. 15 years? I can't go to prison for 15 years. You should have thought about that before you stole my identity, I said bluntly. This isn't a mistake or poor judgment, Madison. This is a pattern of criminal behavior that you both participated in knowingly. My phone rang again, Mom calling back. I answered on speaker. Harper, I've been thinking about everything Jessica told me and I need to say something. Mom's voice was shaky but determined. I failed you. I've been enabling Jessica's resentment toward you for years because I felt guilty about how hard your life was after your father died. I thought if I supported her against you sometimes, it would balance things out. Jessica looked shocked. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying I taught you that it was okay to treat Harper badly because I was doing it too. Every time you complained about her success, I agreed with you instead of defending her. Every time you criticized her choices, I backed you up. I created an environment where Harper was the problem instead of the solution. The confession hung heavy in the room. Mom continued, I knew you were struggling financially, Jessica, but I never imagined you'd resort to stealing from your sister. Harper, I'm ashamed of what we've done to you, and I understand if you never forgive us. Mom, I said quietly, you helped Jessica fill out loan applications for my house. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. You could face charges too. Silence. Then, in a whisper, I know. I poured 4 cups of coffee and carried them to the table where my family sat like defendants awaiting sentencing. In many ways, that's exactly what they were. Here's the situation, I began, sitting down with my own cup. I have enough evidence to press charges that would put all 3 of you in prison. Jessica and Mom would face federal fraud charges. Madison would face multiple felony theft charges in addition to identity fraud. The prosecutor would love this case because it's clean, well-documented, and has clear victims. David opened his laptop again. I've been running some preliminary research while you were making coffee. Harper, your credit report shows damage that will take years to repair. Your credit score has dropped by over 100 points due to the unauthorized accounts and the large credit utilization ratios. You're probably looking at being denied for mortgages, car loans, maybe even rental applications until this gets sorted out. So, my family didn't just steal my money, I said. They stole my financial future. Harper, Jessica whispered. I never meant for it to hurt you this much. What did you think would happen, Jessica? Did you think identity theft was a victimless crime? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Madison finally looked up from her coffee. What if we paid everything back? What if we fixed your credit and made it all right? With what money? I asked. Jessica, you don't have a job that pays enough to cover even the minimum payments on the credit cards you opened. Madison, you're 17 with a part-time minimum wage job. Mom's on a fixed income. Where exactly would $150,000 in restitution come from? The mathematical reality of their situation settled over them like a weight. They had destroyed my credit and accumulated debts they could never repay, all while attacking my character for having the success they'd been secretly stealing. There is one option, David said carefully. It's not pretty, but it might keep everyone out of prison. What kind of option? Jessica asked hopefully. Full financial disclosure and supervised restitution, Harper would essentially become your financial conservator until every penny is paid back. That means complete transparency. All income, all expenses, all financial decisions go through Harper. Jessica would need to get a full-time job and live on a strict budget until the debt is paid. Madison would need to work and turn over all earnings, except for basic necessities. The stolen merchandise gets returned, and you all attend financial counseling. That could take decades, Jessica protested. Yes, David said bluntly. It could. That's what happens when you steal someone's financial identity. The alternative is prison. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Patricia, a criminal defense attorney I'd helped with her business finances. I'd sent her a summary of the situation earlier, and she was responding with legal advice. I just heard from my attorney friend, I said, reading the text. She says I have a strong case for both criminal charges and civil recovery. She also says that if I choose not to press charges, I can still pursue civil action to recover damages and force asset forfeiture if necessary. Asset forfeiture? Mom's voice came through the speakerphone. It means they could take your house, Mom, Jessica's car, any assets that can be liquidated to cover the debt. The weight of the consequences finally seemed to penetrate Jessica's denial. Harper, please. We're family. We made terrible mistakes, but we're still family. You keep saying that word like it means something, I replied. Last night you smiled while your daughter threw wine on me and called me pathetic. This morning I discovered you've been systematically stealing my identity and destroying my credit for months. At what point does family become irrelevant? David reached across the table and took my hand. Harper, whatever you decide, I want you to know that watching you handle this situation has shown me exactly the kind of person you are. You're strong, you're fair, and you're not letting love blind you to reality. I looked at him questioningly. I was wrong last night, he continued. I thought you were choosing them over yourself, but what you were actually doing was giving them every possible chance to choose you back. Now that they've shown you who they really are, you're responding appropriately. He pulled the ring box from his jacket pocket and set it on the table next to the financial documents. I still want to marry you, Harper, especially after seeing how you handle a crisis. But first, we need to clean up this mess. Madison stared at the ring box, then at me. You were going to get engaged last night? And I ruined it? You didn't ruin it, Madison. You revealed it. All of this was already happening. The theft, The fraud, the disrespect, last night just brought it into the open. I picked up the ring box and looked at David. Are you sure about this? You'd be marrying into a family with felony convictions. I'd be marrying you, he said simply. Everything else is fixable. Jessica broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. I've ruined everything. I've ruined your engagement, your credit, your relationship with Mom. I've turned Madison into a criminal. I've destroyed our family. No, I said firmly. You've revealed what our family actually was underneath all my enabling. Now we get to decide what we want it to become. I looked around the table at the three most important women in my life, all of them broken and ashamed and finally forced to face reality. Here are my terms, I said. Full criminal and civil immunity in exchange for complete financial servitude until every penny is recovered with interest. Financial counseling for everyone. Family therapy for everyone. Jessica gets a full-time job within 30 days or the deal is void. Madison returns every stolen item and works to pay restitution. Mom signs over any assets that can help cover the debt. Everyone submits to credit monitoring and regular check-ins with my attorney. And if we agree to all of that, Jessica asked, then we start over, as equals, with respect and boundaries and honest communication. And if we don't agree, then I press charges, pursue civil action, and you face the full consequences of your choices. The apartment fell silent, except for the ticking of my kitchen clock and Madison's quiet sniffling. They had until tomorrow to decide whether they wanted to save our family or save themselves. The silence stretched for nearly 5 minutes before Madison spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Harper, I need to tell you something else. About the blog. Jessica's head snapped up. Madison, don't. She's going to find out anyway, Mom. David already knows about computers and investigations. Madison wiped her eyes and looked directly at me for the first time all day. I've been writing a blog called Rich Relative Chronicles for the past 8 months. About you. About how to manipulate wealthy family members. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. What kind of blog? David was already opening his laptop. What's the URL, Madison? She told him, and within seconds he'd pulled up a website that made my blood run cold. The header read, Rich Relative Chronicles, a teenager's guide to family bank accounts, with a subtitle that said, When Your Aunt Has More Money Than Sense. Read the post titles out loud, I said, my voice dangerously calm. David began reading from the screen. How to make them feel guilty for having more than you. The art of the emergency loan request. Why gratitude is optional when they owe you for being related. Making your rich relative feel like the bad guy. 10 ways to make their success about your suffering. There are 43 posts, Madison said miserably. I've been writing about every interaction we've had, every dollar you've given us, every time you tried to set boundaries. I turned it all into content about manipulation strategies. How many followers? I asked. 12,300. The number hit me like a physical blow. 12,000 people had been reading detailed accounts of how to emotionally and financially manipulate someone like me. My personal life had become a how-to guide for family exploitation. There's more, David said grimly, scrolling through the site. She's been posting screenshots of your text messages, copies of your bank transfer confirmations, even photos of gifts you bought them. And look at this comment section. I stood up and read over his shoulder. Hundreds of comments from people sharing their own strategies for manipulating wealthy family members. Stories of fake emergencies, guilt trip techniques, ways to make successful relatives feel obligated to provide financial support. My nephew's situation had created a community of financial predators. Madison, I said, my voice shaking with controlled fury. You turned our family into entertainment and our relationship into a business model. I didn't mean for it to become so big, she sobbed. It started as just venting about feeling inferior to you, but then people started following and commenting, and I got caught up in the attention. Jessica was staring at her daughter like she'd never seen her before. Madison, how could you do this to Harper? She's done nothing but love and support you. Because loving and supporting me made me feel worthless. Madison screamed, finally exploding with years of resentment. Do you know what it's like to be 17 and have your aunt buy you a car because your mom can't afford it? Do you know how that feels when you're trying to fit in with kids whose parents can provide for them? So you humiliated me online instead of talking to me about it? I tried talking to you. Every time I brought up feeling weird about taking your money, you just said it was no big deal and bought me something else. You never listened to how it actually affected me. The accusations stung because there was truth in it. I had been so focused on solving their financial problems that I'd ignored the emotional complexity of their dependence on me. You're right, I said, surprising everyone. I should have listened better. I should have recognized that my help was hurting your self-esteem. But Madison, the appropriate response to feeling uncomfortable about someone's generosity is not to steal from them and mock them online. David had been quietly reading more of the blog. Harper, there's something else you need to see. She posted about last night. My heart sank as he read from the newest post. The wine incident. How I finally put my rich aunt in her place. Last night I threw wine on my aunt's expensive shirt at her birthday dinner and told her exactly what I thought about her constant showing off. My whole family supported me because they're tired of her act too. Finally, standing up to a money manipulator felt amazing. Full story and tips for confronting your own rich relative below. The post had already received over 200 comments, most of them celebrating Madison's courage in putting down a narcissistic family member. I'm going to be sick, I said, sinking back into my chair. You turned the worst night of my life into content for strangers to applaud. Harper, I'm so sorry, Madison cried. I was angry and hurt, and writing about it made me feel powerful. I never thought about how it would affect you. The blog has affiliate links, David observed. She's been making money off of this content. About $1,500 in the last month alone. So not only had Madison been humiliating me online, she'd been profiting from it while I paid her bills and bought her clothes and supported her lifestyle. Mom's voice came through the speakerphone. Madison, I want you to come home right now so we can discuss this properly. Actually, Mom, don't hang up yet, I said. There's something I need all of you to understand. This isn't just about money anymore. Madison has potentially exposed herself and Jessica to additional legal liability. What do you mean? Jessica asked. David explained. Some of these blog posts contain admissions of illegal activity. The post about emergency loan techniques includes instructions for forging signatures on loan applications. The post about credit card creativity explains how to use someone else's credit identity. The post about shopping with Rich Aunt's reputation details exactly how Madison committed retail fraud. Oh God, Jessica whispered. She's confessed to crimes online? In detail, with timestamps that correspond to actual criminal activity. Any prosecutor would love this case because the defendants have documented their own guilt and published it for thousands of people to read. Madison went pale. Can I delete it? Can I take it all down? It's too late for that, David said. I've already archived everything using web preservation tools. The evidence exists regardless of whether the site stays active. Plus, deleting it now would look like destruction of evidence, which could add additional charges. So what does this mean for our deal? Jessica asked. I looked around at my family, criminal, manipulative, and now stupid enough to document their crimes online, and realized something profound had shifted in my thinking. It means the deal just changed, I said. The blog stays online, but Madison edits every post to tell the truth about what really happened. She explains the manipulation, acknowledges the lies, and turns her platform into an education tool about the harm caused by family financial abuse. But that will ruin my reputation online, Madison protested. Good, I said bluntly. Your online reputation is built on lies and manipulation anyway. If you want to avoid criminal charges, you're going to use that platform to make amends. And the money she made from the blog? David asked. Goes toward restitution, obviously. Mom's voice came through the phone, shaky but determined. Harper, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. If we do everything you're asking, the jobs, the counseling, the restitution, the public apologies, do you think you can ever forgive us? The question hung in the air like a prayer. I looked at David, who squeezed my hand encouragingly, then at Jessica and Madison, both of them looking genuinely remorseful for the first time all day. Mom, I think the better question is whether you all can forgive yourselves. I'm angry, and I'm hurt, but I'm not destroyed. You three have to live with knowing that you systematically betrayed someone who loved you unconditionally. The question is whether you're capable of becoming people worthy of that love. Madison stood up suddenly. I want to start fixing this right now. Can I use your laptop to edit the blog posts? Madison, Jessica said, are you sure? Once you post those corrections, everyone will know that everything you wrote before was lies. Madison looked at her mother, then at me. Good. I want them to know. I want Harper to see that I understand what I did wrong. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope that my family might actually be capable of change. David, I said, do you still want to marry into this mess? He smiled and opened the ring box. Harper Collins, will you marry me despite the fact that your family is going to be in financial servitude to you for the next decade? I looked around at my criminal relatives, my destroyed credit, my violated privacy, and the man who was willing to sign up for all of it because he believed in us. Yes, I said, but we're eloping. I'm not planning a wedding while managing 3 criminal cases. As David slipped the ring onto my finger, Madison burst into fresh tears. But for the first time, they looked like tears of relief rather than manipulation. Maybe there was hope for us, after all. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, making coffee for 5 people instead of just myself. It had become our Saturday morning routine, family meetings, that David had nicknamed financial rehabilitation sessions, but that felt more like genuine family time than anything we'd shared in years. Jessica sat at my dining table with her laptop open, updating the monthly budget spreadsheet that tracked every penny of her restitution payments. She'd gotten a job at a medical billing company within 2 weeks of our ultimatum, and had been promoted twice already. Her natural intelligence, channeled productively for the first time in years, was finally serving her well. Madison was across from her, also with a laptop, working on her blog. What had started as a platform for manipulation had transformed into something unexpected, a brutally honest account of family healing that now had over 30,000 followers. Her posts about recognizing manipulation, rebuilding trust, and learning accountability had resonated with people dealing with similar family dynamics. Harper, Madison said, looking up from her screen, I got another message from someone whose family is in counseling because they recognize their own patterns in my story. That makes 11 families this month. That's wonderful, honey, I said, and meant it. Madison had initially resisted the idea of public accountability, but she'd discovered that helping others avoid her mistakes gave her life more purpose than manipulating people ever had. David walked in from the bedroom, pulling on a sweater and carrying a folder of legal documents. Good news from Patricia, he said, referring to my attorney. The credit bureau agreed to the final corrections to Harper's report. Her credit score is actually higher now than it was before all this happened, thanks to the fraud alerts and the documented resolution process. And the criminal investigation? Jessica asked nervously. Officially closed as of yesterday. The prosecutor was impressed with the restitution progress and the voluntary cooperation. No charges will be filed as long as the payment plan stays on track. Mom's voice came through the speakerphone from her house 20 miles away. She'd joined us virtually every Saturday since selling her house to help cover the restitution debt. I have an update from my end. The financial counselor says, I'm ready to graduate from the program next month. Mom, that's fantastic, I said. The change in my mother had been the most dramatic of all. Forced to confront her role in enabling Jessica's financial irresponsibility, she'd discovered that her guilt over my father's death had been driving years of poor decisions. Working with a counselor to separate grief from guilt had helped her become the mother I'd needed all along. There's something else, Mom continued. I want to read something to all of you. We settled around the table as Mom's voice filled the room. I've been writing letters to Harper that I never intended to send, as part of my counseling homework, but I want to share this one. She cleared her throat and began reading. Dear Harper, I realized this week that I spent years being angry at you for succeeding when I should have been proud. I resented your strength because it reminded me of my weakness. I supported Jessica against you because her failures made me feel like a better parent than her independence made you seem like a better daughter. I confused enabling with love and boundaries with rejection. I'm sorry it took criminal charges for me to understand that loving someone means wanting them to grow, not just wanting them to need you. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of Madison sniffling. Even after 6 months of family therapy, these moments of raw honesty still caught us all off guard. "Mom," I said, "you didn't need to share that, but I'm glad you did. It helps me understand that this wasn't really about money at all." "No," Jessica agreed. "It was about feeling powerless and taking that out on the person who seemed to have power. Harper, I spent so many years angry at you for having your life together that I never stopped to appreciate what it cost you to get there." David squeezed my hand under the table. "Speaking of costs and appreciation, I have some news too." Everyone looked at him expectantly. The wedding venue confirmed our date for next month. Small ceremony, just family and a few friends. Harper's assistant and my brother will be the witnesses. "Jessica, you're still willing to help with the flowers?" "I'd love to," Jessica said, smiling. "I never thought I'd get to help plan your wedding after everything I did." "You almost didn't," I said honestly. "But watching you rebuild yourself has been one of the most inspiring things I've ever witnessed. You went from someone who stole my identity to someone I trust with the most important day of my life." Madison looked up from her laptop again. "Can I read something too? It's from my blog post this week." We nodded, and she began reading from her screen. "6 months ago, I threw wine on my aunt and called her pathetic because I was angry that her success made my failures obvious. I turned our family crisis into online content because I thought getting attention from strangers was more important than earning respect from people who loved me. I've learned that healing isn't about making dramatic gestures or posting perfect apologies. It's about doing the boring daily work of becoming someone worthy of trust. My aunt didn't save our family by forgiving us. She saved our family by refusing to accept unacceptable behavior." "Madison," I said, "I want you to know that watching you grow from a manipulative teenager into a thoughtful young woman has been incredible. You're going to make an amazing maid of honor." She beamed at me. "I still can't believe you asked me to do that." "Who else would I ask? You're my family." David stood up to refill his coffee, then paused by my chair. "Harper, I have something to say too, if everyone doesn't mind." "Go ahead," I encouraged. 6 months ago, I thought Harper was choosing her family over herself, and I was prepared to end our relationship because I couldn't watch someone I loved be abused. What I didn't understand was that Harper wasn't choosing between herself and her family. She was choosing between enabling and healing. Everything she did, from cutting off the money to pressing for accountability, was about saving her family from themselves. He looked around the table at Jessica, then at the phone where Mom was listening, then back at me. "I've learned that real love sometimes requires making the people you care about face consequences they don't want to face. Harper taught all of us that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're foundations that make real relationships possible." "That's going in my vows," I said, wiping away unexpected tears. "Good," David laughed, "because I stole it from something you said in therapy 3 months ago." Jessica closed her laptop and looked around the table. "I have a confession to make. Sometimes I still feel jealous of Harper's success. The difference now is that instead of resenting her for it, I use it as motivation to build something for myself. My supervisor wants to recommend me for the management training program at work." "Jessica, that's wonderful," I exclaimed. "You'd be great at management." "The point is," Jessica continued, "I'm finally building a life I'm proud of instead of tearing down someone else's life because I was ashamed of mine." Mom's voice came through the speaker. "I think that's the real lesson here. We all confuse taking with receiving and giving with enabling. Harper, you taught us that love without boundaries isn't really love at all." I stood up to start breakfast, feeling lighter than I had in years. I learned something too, though. I learned that my worth isn't measured by how much I give to other people. It's measured by how well I respect myself and how clearly I communicate my values. "And what are your values?" Madison asked, pulling out her phone to record the answer. She'd been documenting our family healing process for her blog, with everyone's permission. I thought for a moment while scrambling eggs. I value authenticity over harmony. I value growth over comfort. I value mutual respect over unconditional enabling. And I value family relationships that make everyone better, not just family relationships that make everyone comfortable. That's beautiful, Madison said, stopping the recording. Can I use that in this week's blog post? Of course. But add this. The hardest lesson I learned was that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to protect someone from the consequences of their choices. Real love requires courage, not just kindness. David wrapped his arms around me from behind as I cooked. Are you sure you want to marry into this family? We're all pretty high maintenance. I'm marrying Harper, he said, echoing what he'd told me 6 months ago. The rest of you are just bonus material. Very entertaining bonus material. As we sat down to eat breakfast together, I realized that the family I'd almost lost 6 months ago was stronger now than it had ever been. Not because we'd learned to avoid conflict, but because we'd learned to resolve it honestly. Jessica was supporting herself and rebuilding her self-respect. Madison had transformed her social media presence from a platform for manipulation into a tool for healing. Mom had learned to separate guilt from love and was building genuine relationships with both her daughters for the first time. And I had learned that setting boundaries didn't make me selfish, it made me whole. One more thing, I said as we finished breakfast. I want everyone to know that I forgive you completely. Not because what you did wasn't serious, and not because the consequences weren't real, but because you've all proven that you're capable of becoming better people when held accountable for your actions. Madison began crying again, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. Harper, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving that your faith in me wasn't misplaced. You don't have to prove anything, honey. You just have to keep being honest and keep growing. That's enough. As David and I cleared the breakfast dishes, I reflected on how dramatically our family had changed. 6 months ago, we were bound together by guilt, obligation, and financial dependence. Today, we were choosing each other based on love, respect, and genuine care. The difference between those two types of relationships was the difference between surviving and thriving. And for the first time in my adult life, our family was thriving. Before everyone left, I asked them to gather around the table one more time. I want to share the most important thing I learned through all of this. Family isn't about blood or obligation or shared history. Family is about choosing each other every day, treating each other with respect, and supporting each other's growth even when it's uncomfortable. What we have now is real family. What we had before was just people related by genetics who were stuck in destructive patterns. So, what's the life lesson? Madison asked, already thinking about her blog post. I smiled, looking around at these people I loved who had almost destroyed me, but had instead helped me discover my own strength. The lesson is that the worst thing you can do for people you love is protect them from the consequences of their actions. Real love sometimes requires tough choices, but the result is genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than manipulation and resentment. And sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. But if you're brave enough to demand better, you might discover that the people you love are capable of becoming the family you've always needed. As everyone prepared to leave, gathering laptops and coats and making plans for next week's meeting, I felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had almost destroyed us but had ultimately saved us. Because of that terrible birthday dinner 6 months ago, Madison had learned accountability. Jessica had discovered self-respect. Mom had found her voice. David and I were planning our wedding, and I had learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. The wine stain on my silk blouse had been impossible to remove, so I'd thrown the shirt away. But sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the ugliest circumstances, and our family was proof that healing is always possible for people brave enough to face the truth about themselves. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where family members took advantage of your generosity or success? How did you handle setting boundaries with people you love who were treating you poorly? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content about family relationships, personal growth, and finding the courage to demand better treatment from the people in your life. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family members, even when it feels scary. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you accept from them. Choose wisely, and never be afraid to demand the respect you deserve. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.